Alright everybody, this is going to be a quick video to explain how to set up a simple Mecanim Animation Controller. For those who don't know, we're going to use the giant worm in this case. This is the controller that's already set up in the demo when you download the character. We're basically going to recreate this. So let's assume here that we do not have a controller in our animator. So let's just say none. And now when we press play, the giant worm doesn't really do anything because he's stuck underground. Let's just check him out. There he is. He's just sitting there because there's no animation. So we need to create a new controller. So I'm going to just go to my demo here. I'm going to say create a new animation controller. We're going to call this Giant Worm 2. Drag that onto your character. And then when you click your character, you can see it right there. You can also, of course, select it from the list here if you prefer. Once it's selected, if your character is selected, go to the Animator tab, and you see it's empty here. We have an entry, an exit, and an any state node. There are many ways to do animation controllers, and there's a lot of ways to use this new entry and exit. We're going to just create a simple one. I suggest looking into it more if you want to do more creative things with the Animator Controller, and in another video we'll explain how to use layers to create new animations and such. So we have our giant worm model over here in our model section, and the worm, the white little paper here shows that it's got animations and such attached. So here are all our animations. We can preview them in here. That's the hidden. Here's the appear animation. There you go. And if we expand that, we have all the animations. So the first one you bring in is going to be the default. So let's just bring in the idle first. It's orange, which means it's default. Entry will go directly to the default state, which is idle. It's also important to note that when you're in here, you can change the looping of the animation. Loop time and loop pose is checked. So if you ever find that an idle animation isn't looping, check the Model Animations tab, select the animation, make sure those are clicked, and then hit Apply. So we have our idle animation, and now when we press play, the worm is idling. So there we go. He's just going to sit there and idle, and he's not going to do anything else. He is, of course, going to look at, because in the previous video I made, we included a look at script. So that's pretty cool. Now we need to get him to do things. So we have a whole bunch of animations here. I'm going to just bring them all over. I like to set this up all at once, so I'm going to bring my appear animation and my disappear animation. Those are very similar, so I'll set those next to each other. We have attack 1, attack 2, attack 3. In this case, those are all single attacks. There's no looping involved. And we have block 1, 2, and 3. Now, block here is actually a looping animation. Block 1 and block 3 are the entry and exit of the animation, and block 2 is the loop itself. So we're going to put those all side by side for each other. We also have a death animation, and a got hit body, and a got hit in the head, and an idle break. And I think that is all. And we also have our hidden animation. Now that's just, he happens to be underneath, and we'll keep him underneath when he disappears, so we'll put that by disappear. Alright, from the idle, he can go to any of these states, but really he can go there from any other state, in theory. So what we're going to use this any state node, and we're going to right click, make a transition to attack, make a transition to attack 2, make a transition to attack 3. Now I generally will do this all at once and then do the next step, but let's just separate it a little bit. We need to have a trigger to trigger attack 1. So in our parameters tab, make sure parameters is selected up here, click the plus, and we're going to create a new trigger. We're just going to call this attack 1. And then selecting our transition, conditions plus attack 1. We're going to do similar for attack 2 and attack 3. Trigger attack 2, trigger attack, oops. There we go, attack 3. One other way of doing this, let me quickly attach these real quick, attack 2, attack 3. One other way of doing this would be to have a trigger that just says attack, and perhaps an integer attack number, and we'll set that to 1 for now. And you could say regular attack plus attack number equals 1, and then 2 and 3 for that. It's really a personal preference and the way you're doing your other scripting. Perhaps if the attack is chosen randomly, then you would do this method. But of course, you could simply call the other attacks numbers triggers from your script too. So we're going to select this and then hit the minus button to delete it and go back to attack 1. And up here we will delete that and delete that. Now, since we have all these other triggers, they're going to be triggered in the exact same way. So let's do a whole bunch of them. We're going to trigger here, we're going to trigger this here, and we're going to trigger start block. We're going to trigger death. These are all going to be single triggers, so we're just going to connect all of those. And we're also going to assign the trigger to the conditions of the transition. Alright, now that we've all set those up, we have two other things here that we have to handle. One is that after block 1, we need to transition to block 2. So let's just create a transition. Right-click on block 1, select block 2, and we have the transition right here between the two. Selecting that, we can actually preview the transition here, and we see blocks. Now block 2 is going to loop back and forth. So that works pretty well. However, how do we end it? We can't really, I mean, we could use another trigger from block 2, but if we did that, then block 2 would have to end before block 3 actually is triggered. So instead, we're going to use the any state again. This means it can start at any time. We're going to make a transition to block 3. Block 3 transition, we're going to create a new trigger called end block and set that to block 3 condition. That way, when end block is called, when perhaps if the player is controlling the worm, when the player lets go of the block button, or when the AI considers the block to be done, you can call end block and it will trigger the end block transition. Alright, and after each one, if we don't have a transition out of this, then it goes back to, it will just pause basically. So we need a transition at the end. So after appear, we're going to make transition to the idle. Condition is empty because it's just going to do it at the end of the animation. If there's no conditions, it will just go there directly. So now let's go and press play, and we can actually trigger these through the animator tab. So let's walk back and see this animation. Okay, I clicked out so that my mouse no longer controls it. So let's check these out. We're going to try disappear. There we go. We see him disappearing, and it goes to hidden, which is now just looping back and forth. We can trigger appear, and right after at the end of appear, it's going to go to the idle. And let's try the attacks. Attack 1, that looks cool. Attack 2, attack 3. We'll do the appear and the disappear. Start the block, and now he triggers the repeating block, and when we click end block, he comes up. And we have got hit body, got hit in the head. We have our idle break. It's a slightly longer animation. And then we have the death. Now, since there's no issue with the trigger saying, oh, he can only attack if he's not dead or anything like that, if we click attack, he's going to just snap right into it. Now, here's one trick that's fun to use. Our block's a cool block. Let's start that again. It comes down, he blocks that loops, and when you're ready, you can do that for as long as you want. When you're ready, you can do the end block. Which is at the bottom here, end block. And he comes back up. However, in a fast-paced game, that might be a little bit too slow for you. So one trick you can do is just to, from your idle or other states, click the end block, and he'll jump down real quick and block, because Unity does interpolate between two states, and it won't be an instant change unless you set it up. You do have this state right here where it's a very short transition, and that's what we see when we click this and he goes down real fast. He transitions in just a brief moment to block. So if you've got an attack script and you know he's going to block in literally half a second or less, you can do that and we'll just do a quick block and it'll block the shot. This is one little trick. you don't have to do things in the same order. And so that's pretty much setting up your animator controller. The one cool thing, I don't know if it's cool or not for you, but if you make changes in this during runtime, they do hold when you press stop. So you can make all the changes you want and press stop. So that's setting up an animation controller. It's a very basic setup. There's a lot more you can do with it. Of course, we didn't get into layers or blend trees or anything in this point. But this is a good way to just get into it and test out transitions.